Can Israel ever win at the UN? It's a question that does not even need to be answered, and yet here we are. Hi, Rabbi.
Or we know what the answer
Right,
is. It's only a matter of whether we could figure out if there was another way to get to a different answer.
right, and understanding what the history of what's going on. So just so everyone knows, what we're referring to is earlier this week there was a United Nations Security Council resolution that had many different forms. The form that passed is not the one that the United States had put forward. It decouples the release of hostages from the ceasefire to a certain extent. And this was not rejected by the United States. The United States did not veto it or vote against it. They, what's it called? They abstained. They abstained. And so now we have found ourselves, we find ourselves in this strange place where I can't remember in my lifetime being before when, because of actions that the UN has taken, Israel and I feel more isolated than ever. So I'm wondering if we could take a step back, because this is not new. The UN is why Israel is here. I mean, it's because of the UN that Israel exists, no?
UN Resolution 181 in 1947 created or called for the partition of British Mandate Palestine into two states, one Jewish and one Arab. And we know what happened. The Arabs rejected it, Israel accepted it, and then in 1948, when Israel created its independence, it became an official UN member state. The problem becomes soon after that,
Right.
And that is that we have had decades, literally decades, of a continuing history of one-sided, hostile approach to Israel, and that's even despite some of the UN security secretary generals who have acknowledged the one-sided bias. Both Ban Ki-moon and Antonio Guterres both called for Israel to be treated equally as any other state, and that has not happened. Why is that? Let's just, again, we got to step back and understand that. And that is because since Israel's establishment, Arab member states, the Arab bloc, have used the General Assembly as a forum for isolating and chastising Israel. With the support of small third world nations, particularly those in the what's called the non-aligned movement, Arab states, because there's a lot of Arab states and only one of Israel, Arab states have had little difficulty passing harsh anti-Israel resolutions. And those UN actions have played an important role in the conflict. We can go to resolutions 242 and 338 passed after the 1967 and the 1973 wars, calling for Israel to withdraw from territories and to call for peace talks between Israel and its Arab nations based on land for peace. Some of that's happened, some of it hasn't. There was resolution 2334 in December of 2016. The United States abstained from that one, condemning Israel's settlement building, and that is seen in some way as rewarding the Palestinians to continue down the dangerous path that they have gone on by avoiding direct negotiations with Israel. We've got, hey, thanks, Rabbi David. Uh, in December of 2017, the U.S. vetoed a Security Council resolution calling to reverse the United States decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. There have been just numerous over and over. In fact, I got the statistics from 2022. In 2022, the General Assembly of the United Nations approved 15 anti Israel resolutions in 1 year. 1 year, 15 anti Israel resolutions. How many other resolutions against all the other member states combined?
And wait. Before you even answer that,
Yeah,
who
well,
are some of the other member states? Because we're talking about Iran, we're talking about North
oh
Korea,
yeah,
we're talking about
this,
China.
this yes, this is the total hypocrisy of it. All right, that 15 resolutions against one country, Israel, and what do you have? All right, who were the other ones that were that resolutions? Okay, Russia was came in second with six. Okay, mostly condemning their invasion of Ukraine, and then you have North Korea and Afghanistan and Myanmar and Syria and Iran, and by the way, the United States were all hit with one each. Okay, forget Saudi Arabia, China, Lebanon, Turkey, Venezuela, Qatar, all of which have horrible human rights records with zero.
So how?
Well, because you have a block of Arab nations that are able to pass that with the support of other small nations that are looking to get Arab oil or.
But Rabbi Mike, I get the block of Arab nations. I even understand Russia and China. The part of this that worries me is everyone else. It's why the rest of the member nations don't stand up against the hypocrisy. And the only thing I can think is, and again, this doesn't jive with the fact that it's because of the UN that Israel exists, but the only thing that I can understand from this is deeply entrenched anti-Semitism that is
Yeah,
pervasive throughout the
yeah,
United Nations.
that is where we're coming to.
Okay.
Let me just say a couple more words and recognize that. And I'm going to get the numbers wrong, so please do not quote me on these numbers. But when Israel joined the United Nations, there were 38 countries or 50 countries. Now there are 150 countries that are all of which have an equal vote. Okay, so that's an issue. There is another piece to this, which is that Israel's was for many years the only member state that was consistently denied admission into a regional group. That's a geographic group. All right. And those geographic groups, the create the organizational structure by which member states can participate on UN bodies. Okay, so there are different geographic areas, and they provide. Up until 20 years ago, right, Israel was denied, all right, by the Arab states, right, admission to the Asian regional group, which is, of course, where Israel should be. So
I'm not at all
luckily,
surprised by that, though. I mean, who would they be in partnership with in the Asian group?
I'm not
Yeah.
surprised. I think that this plays into the ongoing bias. The United Nations Human Rights Council's standing agenda number 7. Every meeting of the United Nations Human Rights Council, there is
Whoops.
a an agenda item that says we have to talk about this. And we have to talk about Israel and how it treats Palestinians. Okay, no other. This is the institutional bias. No other country is singled out in the way Israel is. Okay, and I'm going to just sidebar and say the corollary to the United Nations double standard is, by the way, the World Health Organization and the International Red Cross. Okay, because we have, particularly now, ample evidence of Hamas using ambulances to transport fighters and hospitals as military command centers. All right, and the silence of the World Health Organization and the International Red Cross is deafening. Where is the condemnation of Hamas? Okay, the World Health Organization was quick to blame Israel for ordering the evacuation of 22 hospitals, even though the purpose, all right, of the evacuation was to prevent the loss of lives. Okay, and so Monday's passage of the UN Security Resolution is not surprising. I think it's unfortunate. It's disappointing that the United States abstained rather than vetoing it, as they've done in the past. That allowed the resolution to pass. The United States is presenting it as consistent with its policy. I think that's anything but that. It's telling Israel
Well,
on
can
one.
we talk about like why? Why did they abstain?
Because I think that this
Today, the United Nations.
I think that this is a reflection of the poor relationship between the Biden and the Netanyahu administrations. I think that the United States is putting pressure for Israel to not enter Rafah. But on the other hand, it's saying you need to get rid of Hamas. Get rid of Hamas, but you have to stop the war. Okay? Get rid of Hamas, or stop the war, but your hostages, we're not going to worry about them, okay? Because it doesn't condition the ceasefire on the release of the hostages.
It doesn't even mention October 7th, as I understand it.
And that is the whitewashing of October 7th as the beginning of this conflict, this current. All right.
What do you make? How do you attach value to this? What do you call it? This resolution, given that it has no teeth.
Yeah, I mean,
what's the purpose, other than to shame Israel, perhaps?
Virtue signaling. I think that's probably the biggest thing. I think it makes things difficult for Israel. It hurts their war effort. It hurts their standing among other nations. Other nations can hide behind it and say you didn't do this. It doesn't call for a permanent ceasefire. It's only through the remainder of Ramadan. I think it's another one of many resolutions. And so on one hand, yes, it's problematic. On the other hand, so what? There are no sanctions. Okay? Right. There's nothing that matters.
The whole discussion of Ramadan has infuriated me. Not because I don't want everyone to have a peaceful Ramadan, but because we were stripped of our peaceful Simchas Torah.
Yes.
I mean, why does the war have to stop on Ramadan, but it's allowed to wage and begin on a Jewish holiday? Let me ask you another question. So maybe this UN resolution doesn't matter because it doesn't have any teeth. And to play devil's advocate, and I believe it's back on, but there was a delegation headed to Washington that was called off. I believe it's back on now. And there's I just read yesterday there was a Gallup poll, maybe it was Tuesday, a Gallup poll that now 50% of Americans, up from 38%, disapprove of Israel's war in Gaza. So it doesn't have any teeth, but does it have a detrimental impact in real ways?
Yes, I think. Look, I think it demonstrates, in some way, it demonstrates the petulance um, of Prime Minister Netanyahu, right?
How
I,
so?
because I think the whole idea of this delegation was to figure out a way for Israel to go into Rafah or to deal with Rafah. Okay, so I'm going to pull out the delegation, right, from uh, the, from Israel's most trusted and strongest ally, okay, who is trying to figure out how to help them if they are, okay, but at least have the conversation between Israel and the United States about Rafah. Right? I think pulling that was just a temper tantrum. Right?
But
Now,
isn't abstaining also a bit of a temper tantrum?
yes,
Okay.
yes, for sure. Yeah, I think it is. That's why I say I think that this was just a reflection of the very poor relationship that has been cultivated over a number of years between the Biden and the Netanyahu.
Do you put that at, because right now, being in an election year, people are going to say, "Oh, well, under a Republican, leadership, we wouldn't have had this problems." Where do you put the burden of that failing relationship, or do you?
Yeah, I, I think when push comes to shove, right, I actually think that it is um, it is not true that Israel has um, done better under I'll say under Trump than under Biden, and I'm going to kind of widen the circle and say um, Prime Minister Netanyahu has cultivated relationships, okay, with a number of right wing, okay, Russia, and other leaders, okay, Bolsonaro, um, who, when push came to shove, when everything came down, okay, there was no relationship between Israel and those countries. Right? Where was the strong support? Right? It was at least Biden stood up and
And
sent,
showed up,
all
like
right,
literally
and
went.
right, and
Yeah.
and sent military aid. Right? So I think that I have to, in some way, put a little. I have to put, if I got to tip the scale one way, I I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu has been, I'm going to say it, an obstacle to peace, knowing that I am quoting um, uh, Senator Schumer, and I had problems with that uh,
You
with
know,
that that whole speech in and of itself.
I forgot about that. That would actually be, that's a really interesting piece to discuss. Not, I mean, the content of the speech certainly, but the idea, the symbolism of the highest ranking Jewish, by the way, we should also mention Senator Lieberman, Zichrono Livracha,
Yeah,
but the highest ranking Jewish government member of the government saying something like he did, which, by the way, he was misquoted. Like, he did not say that right now we should have new elections. He said after the war there should be new elections. So we also took him out of context, but that's a fascinating
right.
piece of this puzzle.
Yeah. Let's come to why I think that the United Nations and Israel has had this just long standing, and I think you are correct. Right? I think that um, it's if we get to the root of the problem, it is the deep seated anti-Semitism, and I think that the what I what I want to kind of posit is that there are two forms of anti-Semitism that are at play here. Okay? There's the one that we think about, all right, that we assume, all right, and that is that Jews are devils, okay, that Jews can do no right. And that's based in classical Christian anti-Semitism. Jews are evil. Okay? But there's another, right, we'll call it the opposite end of the spectrum. Right? The Jews are angels, right? And the Jews should do no wrong. Right? And therefore, right? And by the way, we Jews have promulgated this. We've taught an exalted vision of this ethical idea. All right. But I think that and this is a Christian idea, putting Jews on a higher ethical plane, right, have meant that every time that we're not there, people are able to point the finger, right? And I think that um, both of these ideas came at a time when Jews didn't have power,
Mm.
right? And now, okay, now that we have power, okay, what do we do with that power? Right? If we are completely terrible or we're not allowed to make any mistakes. Right? Um, there was a book, Robert Wistrich wrote a lethal obsession on anti-Semitism, and it's really talking about the anti-Semitism we're experiencing now. Right? But in the end, right, what is Israel going to do? What do we do in the United Nations? What do we do as a country? Well, we are going to not be passive. Right? We're going to refuse to commit suicide so that the world can say nice things about us. Right? We're living in a world, okay, where other nations don't play by our rules. Right? Yes, Israel has an unbelievable code of conduct. Right? Tohar Haneshek, purity of arms. Right? Ask any soldier, they've got it in their pocket. Right? And yet we're fighting an enemy that has no code of conduct. Hamas doesn't have a code of conduct. Right?
I've never understood. Ever since we've been talking about ceasefires, that what you just said, that one piece has baffled me. How can there be a ceasefire between an army with a code of conduct and one without?
Right. And this is where the end here. All right. Here's a conclusion that isn't a conclusion is what can Israel do in the United Nations? Well, it can continue to hold its own high ethical standard, right? So that we can um, sleep at night with our heads held high,
Yep.
right? Because we're not going to win, right?
Mm.
There'll be moments, okay, where we can give a thumbs up, okay, where there's a generosity of spirit, but we as a Jewish people, right, and Israel as a country have to be able to say we held the ethical line, right? And we're going to do it even even as we are going to fight, right, and defend ourselves as every country should be able to. Right? And we're going to stand up in the United Nations and we're going to call out the hypocrisy, even though we're not going to be able to change it because there just simply are too many countries. Right? But we're going to continue at the same time as we are shouting about the hypocrisy. We're going to be making meetings and connecting with countries and providing the technology and the knowledge that helps other countries be better countries, right? Quietly, if need be, right? So that we can at least say, right, we did what we were supposed to do.
Slept well. We need to be able to sleep well. I know it's not for now, but I just want to say that the fact that we're never, what you said it, we're never going to win. The fact that we're never going to win really begs a longer conversation. What is going on there? And maybe I'm just
Okay,
I will.
I'm going to add one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, and I think that this is a larger war against Western ideals.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we are starting sooner or later, may not be in yours or my lifetime, but it could be, right? Where there is going to be another world war, right? Again, radical Islam, right? And I place radical Islam, right? In the form of Iran and its proxies, who are fighting against all forms of democracy and Western ideals. And Israel exemplifies that.
Right. Israel is simply the embodiment of that in that
Exactly.
neighborhood. And it's the only embodiment of it. Right.
That's right.
And they're an easy target.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's infuriating that European countries and the United States and Canada and others, all right, that embody those ideals in other places around the world, do not see Israel on the front line of what will be that war.
Maybe that's that's the next step of this conversation is there's nothing we can do. We have lost when it comes to radical Islam and certain parts of the world. But there are other parts of the world, France, Germany, Great Britain, that demands that we pay attention to what is going wrong in those parts of, and America. What are we allowing to happen to our value systems that we can so easily ignore?
Right. But being very, very careful that we don't tip the balance, all right, to an ultra nationalism that becomes, I'll say, Hungarian in view, where we can't have anyone else.
Yeah.
That becomes frightening.
Fascinating discussion. Thank you so much for bringing all this.
Thank you, as always,
Good
for
stuff.
challenging me.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it'd be great if we could have like an uplifting session once or twice.
It would be, but I tell you, I'm not alone in this. Everything I do, everything I am now is just revolved around this, and I can't get out of it.
Me too.
Yeah, it's
Me too.
So that's where we are. So we keep plugging away. Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.
Have a lovely
great day.
rest of the day. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.